Καλημέρα.
Good morning from Thessaloniki. Good morning from Velidion Conference Center. I would like to welcome you to this online meeting called The Europe of Regions, The Road to Economic and Social Recovery, organized by Association of the Greek Regions and TIF Helexpo and the European Committee of the Regions. I'm very happy to be with you. Mr. Apostolos Didzikostas, who is the main host of this event, asked me to be the moderator in this event. I was very happy because from my experience in Brussels for the last 6 years, as part of Sky TV, I have realized that the European Committee of the Regions is the backbone of the European Union. Right now, we're all facing a crisis. This crisis might be a huge opportunity because countries like Greece, where the urban centers have a huge amount of population, then it's high time for the regions to prove that they can be self-sufficient, that they can have their own smart networks that would attract people to live there and prosper there. We're going to have a very interesting discussion today because we're having the leading actors of regions. We have the pleasure and honor to have with us Mrs. Elisa Ferreira, who is the European Commissioner for Cohesion and Reforms, as well as Mr. Theodoros Skylakakis, who is the alternate Minister of Finance in Greece, Mr. Yunus Omarjee, who is the President of the Committee on Regional Development, and Mr. Papasteriou, who is the President of the Central Union of Greek Municipalities. I wouldn't like to take too much of your time. I would like to give the floor right away to Mr. Didzikostas, who will tell us his views about whether this crisis could be an opportunity for the regions in the region of Central Macedonia. Yes, this crisis is a huge opportunity, not only for the region of Central Macedonia and not only for the regions of Europe, but for the whole of the European Union. I would like to welcome you all to our event today. I would like to thank Mrs. Varvitsiotti for accepting my invitation to be the moderator of this meeting, because she is the right person, the most suitable person to moderate this event. I would like also to thank the Commissioner, Madam Commissioner, for her reforms. It's a great honor to have you with us today, Madam Commissioner. The speaker is speaking in English now.
We really appreciate your work and your collaboration. Και να καλωσορίσω επίσης και τον πρόεδρο της Επιτροπής Περιφερειακών Υποθέσεων του Ευρωκοινοβουλίου.
And I would like also to welcome Mr. Yunus Omarjee. It's a great honor for us to have you with us today. We're going to talk about a lot of issues today, and we're going to explore how the regions can play a really important role for the future of Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank all of you for attending this event online and all of you for being here with us physically speaking. Unfortunately, not more than 50 people due to COVID-19. It's a great pleasure for the region of Central Macedonia and the Association of Greek Regions to organize this event together with TIF Helexpo under the auspices of the European Committee for the Regions. Our meeting today is held just 2 days after the first presentation by the President of the Commission, Madam Ursula von der Leyen, who talked about the State of the Union. There we saw the President presenting where the European Union is found today, which are our targets, and which is the direction we should move to. Of course, being the president of the European Committee of the Regions, I would like to point out that for us, a pioneering role and decisive role for the future role of Europe for the economy and for recovery and for getting away from this economic and pandemic hygienic crisis, undoubtedly, this role can be played by structural funds. Today, the sources of social cohesion, which luckily, after the decision made by the European Union, will remain at the high level they were in the previous year, we all realize that this is the only way for the economy of the European Union to recover, so that the regions and the member states can recover. In this effort, a catalytic and leading role, a key role, is played by our first speaker in our panel today, the competent commissioner, Ms. Ferreira. She has proven all this year being in charge of the structural funds and of NSRF. She has proven that she has both the skill and the knowledge in very close cooperation with the European unions and municipalities to readjust these funds according to the needs that have derived due to the pandemic. So she moved on to a rescheduling of the European funds immediately after the hygiene crisis, and when we realized that this pandemic will have serious impact on the economies of the European Union. And we have said that we're going to tackle the impact of this pandemic. So what did Europe do? Europe changed the regulations and the rules. The rules today and the regulations today allow the member states and the regions to use more quickly, more easily, and more effectively those social cohesion funds in order to be able to direct them where the problem lies, where the local economies face serious problems and issues. And I'd like to give you some examples from our own reality here in order to be better understood. That's the only way that we can better tackle the pandemic. That's the way that we were able here in Central Macedonia to direct 80 million euros from these funds to our hospitals in order to upgrade our hospitals, both concerning medical and technical equipment and for hiring auxiliary and additional medical personnel in order to be able to tackle the pandemic in the following months. So thanks to the rescheduling that Mrs. Ferreira did and the European Union did, we managed to present our program called The Exodus, or Way Out. That is a program that supports SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, and I'd like to thank Mrs. Ferreira for her support. In this way, we can direct 150 million euros to support small and medium-sized enterprises in Central Macedonia. We can provide a non-refundable subsidy and grant in order to support and help businesses that suffered a lot due to pandemic. And in this way, we safeguard that all people will keep their jobs. These are just two examples that the social cohesion funds can do, because social cohesion funds can be found everywhere around us. The schools where our children go, transportation works, hospitals, the projects for social support and solidarity, projects in tourism, economy and culture. Projects everywhere. Therefore, it is proven, ladies and gentlemen, how and why the regions play this nodal role in the European Union of the present and the future, simply because they transform the impersonal, faceless funds of the European Union into measurable projects for our societies. Our fellow citizens see these projects and they realize how important the European Union role is for our lives and how these funds are turned into active and tangible examples and projects. As you know, the European Committee of the Regions represents 90,000 municipalities and 357 regions in Europe. We have signed the Cohesion Alliance, which is very important for the cohesion policy. In this, we invest in green and digital transition, in social inclusion and justice, and the recovery and resilience of our local economies from the pandemic. In conclusion, I would like to refer to something that I believe that it is a national success for our country. What I mean is the recent summit in July. During that summit, Greece managed to safeguard 71 billion euros from the cohesion fund, from the recovery fund. And this 71 billion euros from the recovery fund will be the tool that will totally change Greece, because this amount of money, together with the cohesion fund and the national resources, the recovery fund is the fund that will give the opportunity to member states, regions and municipalities to move on with their projects and change the country. So I would like to congratulate the competent minister who is going to have the floor later on, Mr. Skylakakis, and he is the one who will be in charge and to manage the recovery fund. Mr. Skylakakis will support this course and will give to the regions and the municipalities the role they can play in relation to the recovery fund and the role of Europe. Thank you very much, Mr. Digicosta. We will move on to Mrs. Ferreira. Besides all the projects that have occurred in recent months, what are going to be the priorities of the Commission? In which sectors would the Commission like to see these funds to be used? Mrs. Ferreira, the floor is yours.
Okay, so Kalimera and Efkaristo, President Tzitzikostas, for this invitation. I welcome the opportunity to discuss with you this morning, with you alongside the Minister of Interior, Mr. Theodorikakos, and all the governors of the 13 regions of Greece, the road to recovery at this crucial junction. And you just mentioned a couple of examples of what has been done. I would just like to say a good, très sincère bonjour à Monsieur Yunus Omarji. And I would like to underline that the European Parliament was another important actor in passing all this legislation. So it's really a joint work. And thank you very much for your nice words. In fact, throughout the years, and thanks to cohesion policy, Greece has completed many important projects in the field of transport, digital infrastructure, entrepreneurship, energy, environment, social and healthcare. You mentioned some of them. These projects not only have improved the daily lives of the Greek people, but have also opened a cycle of job creation, economic activities, and environmentally sustainable growth. The construction of the main motorway backbone, the electricity interconnection of the Cyclades Islands, the Coralia Innovation Center, the rural broadband, the rehabilitation of Karl Lake, the urban regeneration of exactly Thessaloniki seafront, so many museums, schools, health centers. are only some of the examples of what cohesion policy has delivered so far. In fact, Greece has gone through a very painful decade. We are all aware of the sacrifices and efforts, and me in particular, I followed it very closely, that the Greek population has made in order to achieve, again, a sustainable recovery. When all indicators were showing that growth was returning to Greece, the COVID-19 pandemic broke out and stopped this trend, plunging the whole EU into a recession. Greece is not the only case. This puts pressure not only on Greek national health system, but also on entrepreneurship, employment, and in particular tourism, which is the backbone of the economy in many, many Greek islands. Europe is here to help you to get quickly back to a speedy and sustainable recovery and address the challenges of the future. You mentioned it, and in fact, the Greek government has reacted very, very rapidly and provided immediate support to citizens, small and medium enterprises, and of course, the health pandemic facing difficulties because of the lockdown. It made use of the exceptional flexibility provided for by this emergency adaptation of legislation, the Corona Response Investment Initiative, which is known by CRI, in order to finance with around 1.1 billion euros from cohesion policy funds, all these expenditures that include 90,000 small firms and enterprises. On the 21st of July, this last July, 2020, the EU leaders agreed on a recovery plan. This recovery plan you have just mentioned, and also on the multi-annual financial framework for 21-27, which is the multi-annual funding that Greece has benefited from, as many other countries, paving the way out of the crisis and laying foundations for a modern and more sustainable Europe. In the 2021-27 programming period, Greece will receive around 21 billion euros under cohesion policy, this multi-annual framework. This represents a considerable increase. It will be around 8% increase in comparison with the current period that is finishing now. Cohesion policy will continue to be a main source of EU investment and will play a crucial role in supporting the recovery of Europe and of its regions. In this regard, I am glad that the Greek government has decided to continue with 13 regional programs. Greece will also benefit from the new recovery plan for Europe, the biggest part of the Next Generation EU. This will provide very special funding. On one hand, additional resources to the current cohesion policy programs through a program called REACT-EU, but also around 26 billion via the new Recovery and Resilience Facility, and this is dedicated to promote investments and reforms to address the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, but to assist a more robust recovery strategy based on a digital and green transformation of the economy. Again, cohesion, solidarity, and a balanced recovery is at the center of this agenda. Moreover, there will be a new instrument, as you mentioned, the Just Transition Fund and mechanism will serve the ambitious objectives of the European Green Deal for becoming a climate-neutral continent by 2050. This fund aims at its core at alleviating the social and economic impacts of the transition, particularly in those regions that depend a lot from carbon or carbon-related industries. It will support economic diversification and reskilling and upskilling to facilitate the workers' path into the new jobs, facilitating this transition for climate neutrality. In Greece, lignite is still an important source of energy, notably for power generation. I congratulate the Greek administration, and I've done it before when I went to Athens, for its courageous commitment to detach the economy and energy market from lignite by 2028. Greece will receive a considerable amount also in this context of around 1.7 billion from the Just Transition Fund, which will be then increased with other elements that are joined in the mechanism. Support from Just Transition Fund combined with cohesion policy will assist the transformation of the economy of Western Macedonia and the megapolis area in the region of Peloponnesos, and can promote renewable energy sources, in particularly on Crete and Aegean islands. In this respect, in a dialogue with the Greek authorities, we are currently exploring concepts like green islands, which would combine investments in renewable energy, energy efficiency, e-mobility, water and waste management, and greening of tourism. While there is currently no alternative to airborne tourism, we should be aiming for some of these islands to become energy neutral, or why not, even energy positive. We should partly offset the CO2 emissions caused by tourists flying in and out. We see this as a real and tangible contribution to the green transition, as well as an opportunity to market a brand, a new generation for tourist offers. This is extremely important for regions like the South Aegean, where tourism is responsible for 97% of the regional GDP. It will be a challenge to use all these funds, and I mean it. It will be a challenge. A challenge, but of course, an incredible opportunity, as these funds could be a game changer and boost Greece to return to the pre-crisis levels of prosperity. And even more than that, it will give a unique opportunity to reestablish the basis for a sound and sustainable growth. The funds need to contribute to the Greek economy's transformation, stop brain drain, improve citizens' quality of life, and promote the adaptation of the Greek society to a decarbonized economy. In the coming months, we should follow an inclusive approach involving all partners and stakeholders, in particular regions and local entities, in the development of this policy. Together with the Greek government, with those regional, local authorities and all other stakeholders, and also the entrepreneurs, of course, we will discuss what to do. But most importantly, also how to get there, how to get it done. Delivery is the key. For 2021-2027, not only do we have to set ourselves clear policy goals, but we also have to ensure that the mechanisms to deliver them are in place. Where experience shows that they are not, we have to rethink and rearrange the implementation structures. And an opportunity is there, even for reshaping public administration within the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Coordination and ownership, capacity building mechanisms, and simplified and modern delivery and implementation arrangements need to be put in place to ensure that the EU funding will support real economy fast and that citizens will be able to reap the benefits of this new package. Simplification of procedures for project implementation is equally crucial. Even the best investment program will not deliver if project promoters get discouraged by red tape and by delays in the approval of their proposals. Beneficiaries, local and regional authorities need to be capable to deliver complex and demanding projects that required high administrative and technical capabilities. Where necessary, beneficiaries have to be supported by way of a structured mechanism for project preparation and other forms of focused technical assistance. Greece, of course, disposes of a highly qualified, skilled, and experienced staff with a long-standing experience in the management of EU funds. We need to take full advantage of this pool of expertise and knowledge and use it in the best possible way to ensure effective delivery. With the confluence of cohesion policy, the Recovery and Resilience Facility, so RRF, the Just Transition Fund, which is enlarged in a mechanism, and the REACT-EU, European leaders have given us the chance to support Greece to overcome the COVID-19 crisis and prepare for the green and the digital transition. Never were expectations so high, and was the pressure on us to deliver so strong. On the side of the European Commission, we look forward to efficient and fruitful negotiations that will allow us to be ready for implementation as from next year. So it's really, really a race, but a race with a lot of quality. We have got to do the right projects that really make a change for the citizens and for our economy. And I'm sure that together we can make it. So thank you very much. I won't be able to go working with you and listening to you. People from my cabinet will be following the discussion, but a big, big efkaristo to all of you. And we keep the dialogue, we keep going forward, because in every crisis, there is hope, there is a light. Let's go for it. Thank you very much.
We would like to thank Mrs. Ferreira for her presentation. She raised a lot of issues about which we could talk about with our next speaker, Mr. Skylakakis. Good morning, Mr. Skylakakis from Thessaloniki. Welcome to our discussion. Based on what Madam Commissioner mentioned, and she talked about the green reform of our economy. She talked about energy neutral islands and several other reforms of this kind. I'd like to ask you what part of the recovery fund will go to the regions, and what kind of actions will be financed by that? Can you hear me? There is a technical problem. Now it's okay, I believe. I'd like to begin by saying that the Recovery Fund does not work like NSRF, which is the main regional fund. It is a fund that works on the basis of specific projects and programs, regardless of the agency that will take over the implementation of each project or program. The key in the Recovery Fund is time. This fund is neither flexible in order to move dynamically among various projects to see which is more absorbable, nor it has time flexibility. For NSRF, we start planning, and together with M+3, it might last for a whole decade. And several times we have some projects that move on to the next programming period if they are still eligible. But in the case of the Recovery Fund, the total amount of time that the funds are available is just 5 years. The Recovery Fund in the recovery fund, you are not paid back according to the invoices that you present, but you are paid off depending on the landmarks and objectives. If the landmarks and objectives are achieved, then there is a payment back. If the landmarks and objectives are not achieved and made, then there is no payment back. And at the end of the period, that is in the third semester, in the third trimester of 2026, if the landmarks and objectives are not achieved, then the money will be gone, lost, and the state should find its own resources in order to complete any projects or programs it has started. These terms are extremely hard and harsh. And they are final. It is the decision made by the Council of the Summit. In order to realize how important it is, I will present you the results of a survey carried out by Price Waters concerning the projects in Greece. Each project has an initial planning saying that it will start then, and then we will have the contract, and later on we will have the completion. So in relation to its initial planning concerning the existence of a contractor, in average, in recent years, we have a delay of 23 months in order to find a contractor. And as for the completion of the project, that is, from the moment you have assigned the contractor up to the delivery of the project, there is a delay of 28 months. So if you add up the 23 months to the 28 months, the result is 51 months. That is, from the moment the RRF is approved up to the moment that the last completion will occur, it is the amount of delay that we usually have in our projects in recent years. You can all realize how difficult this exercise is. And this means that a revolution will be necessary in the way that we all work in order to be able to achieve the goal, which is not only to absorb these funds, but to absorb these funds by mobilizing at the same time credible funds from the private sector, and do it in a way that will be economic and regionally effective, and do it in a way in which when the audit occurs, and there will be audit here as well, we will not have a great returns of funds. This is perhaps the greatest challenge that we have to face. In the past, we had another big objective, which was the organization of the Olympic Games. But that target then of the Olympic Games was much less complicated than this RRF target. Mr. Skylakakis, I believe you were very clear about how difficult the project you're having ahead of you, and perhaps that it's not realistic for us to make any plans to absorb this money. We must change our realism. Yes, I hope so, Mrs. Verbiziotti says. One question for you. Have you got any projects in your plans? And how much money will it go to the regions? The fund doesn't work in this way. The fund works on the basis of specific standards. In other words, there is no a priori distribution of funds. We can't say that you get this amount of money, the other one gets this amount of money, and so on. This is a process that includes the reforms that should occur. Let's not forget that these projects are linked and connected to reforms. So these proposals are connected to reforms, and this means that there must be a cooperation among the ministries and the regions and communities in order to respond to the reform character of the program. The program might even finance the cost of reforms, and it might finance simplification and digitalization projects. Obviously, the regions should organize in their services in such a way and radical way all this simplification So we should proceed with simplification. This is vital. Besides that, the green projects are important. 37% of the fund, let's not forget that, goes to green actions. This means projects that will limit the climate change in some way and help the country to adjust to climate change and are important for circular economy. For example, all the projects of waste management belong to this category. Therefore, there is a lot of room there is a lot of room for projects to occur. There are also programs that Mr. Tzitzikostas mentioned concerning private investment, but with specific objectives. That is to be linked with digital and green. And the procedure to be carried out is the following. If we want a project or program to be included in the recovery fund, this one should have all the eligibilities of the fund. Here I've got the relevant guidebook that was issued yesterday by the European Commission. At the same time, it should be absolutely realistic that it can achieve the objectives and landmarks that the project itself will set. Because if we don't have a realistic timetable, then the country will not receive the money. When the time comes to check whether the landmark or the target has been achieved, and there is no partial implementation of landmarks and objectives. You can't say that we implemented the project by 43%, whereas the objective was 50%. If you can't achieve the 50%, then you will not receive any funds. This entails a big and great financial risk if we don't do what should be done correctly. We, as a state, should give the money back and the payments in this project for the 43% of the project, but if we don't reach the 50% of the project, we will not receive the money that correspond to this payment. This will create an additional financial and fiscal gap. This is a very difficult, responsible exercise, and I'm certain that the regions, some of them have already done that, will give us projects and programs that will respond to this degree of difficulty that I've just described to you. You have been very clear, Mr. Minister. I believe that their governors, regional governors who are listening to you right now have realized the importance to keep the timelines. At this point, I'd like to say that we work very closely with Mr. Skylakakis and the Ministers of Labour, Infrastructure and Digital Policy in order to set these programs and the proposals of each region that could be included in the recovery fund. We are at a good point right now. We're going to complete these proposals so that the government will be able to assess and evaluate this project. If you allow me, I would like to make an observation. The assessment and evaluation will be a dynamic process until we finally submit our proposals, because the Commission will intervene as well. This process and procedure will be very deep, especially concerning the timetables and the specific actions that are linked to each project. That is, what specific permits and licenses should be given by whom and up to when. What will be the deadline given for potential objections? How can we have standardization of proposals? We should work very closely with regional governors in order to change the law concerning the structure of public works. How can we support the units that will carry out these projects, providing them people, incentives, digital procedures and simplification processes in order to do that effectively and efficiently? Imagine that we have a pipe through which 5 billion euros pass through. If we want this program to be successful, we should include in this pipe 11 something, the gentleman said, but there wasn't good communication and his voice was lost. I would like now to welcome Mr. Yunus Omarjin, who is member of the European Parliament and president of the Committee on Regional Development. Welcome to our meeting here in Thessaloniki. How difficult was it to preserve the cohesion fund at this level? How are the forces in the European Parliament for the cohesion fund? Are there any objections to give this money to the regions? And how difficult will it be to manage the recovery fund in each member state? Can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you hear me? We can hear you, but we can't see you. Can you hear me now? We were able to see you just for all this time, but right now we cannot see you. Probably you should activate your camera. So now you can see me, both see me and hear me. First of all, I would like to greet the president, Mr. Tzitzikostas, who is organizing this event. I would like also to greet the minister and the commissioner, Madam Ferreira. This meeting of ours is held at a very important moment. The agreement that was achieved in the Council is very important. And this is turned to the European Parliament because, as you know very well, the European Parliament has the final word to be placed in the agreement that has been achieved. We talk and negotiate with the Council so that we will promote our views, the views that we consider to be the correct ones for Europe and its regions. In simple words, I would like to remind you of the position of the European Parliament concerning the agreement that was achieved and made and reached. Of course, we all realize the difficulties that might exist at council level. However, we know that there is a difficulty in multi-annual programs. That's why in the discussion that has started right now, we are setting our own conditions and terms in order to reach a common agreement with the Council. We have realized and found out that the funds are minimum. Therefore, the Council should take that into account. Concerning the recovery fund, the view of all the commissioners agree and that there is a problem that has to do with the democratic control of the recovery funds and the problem that has to do with the decentralization of the recovery program. This is an important point that should be mentioned, and I'll come back to that. We have also found out that an effort has been made towards recovery. There are several targets that have been included in European policies, but they won't be achieved. We are concerned about that. We want the fundamental goals that have to do with cohesion to be preserved and kept. And we should keep in mind the objectives of the cohesion throughout the mechanism that is in front of us right now. I had the opportunity to mention to Mr. Tzitzikostas in a previous forum where we both participated in. I told him then that the recovery fund that was presented by the European Council is the same as the percentage of credits for the cohesion. Therefore, we frequently connect that there are problems linked linked and connected to cohesion, and this might lead to a destabilization of policies, because what we don't want to happen is the following: the recovery fund to be too far away from the categorization among the regions. Some of them are developed, some are under development. Our target and goal concerning regional policy is this fund to mainly turned to the less developed regions. Of course, the member states themselves who will manage this money, the member states should make sure that this money will be distributed having in mind what I'm telling you. That is, in big cities will receive a part of this money, but we don't want this to be to the detriment of the less developed regions of a country. Some more remote regions that frequently don't have access to this money. Therefore, we should negotiate with the governments themselves, and this is a point of interest for all European regions, including the Greek ones. So we should negotiate this issue to make sure that this will happen in the right way in the years to come. Next week, we are starting the negotiations concerning the general regulation that includes the cohesion fund, the fund of regional development, Interreg, the transition fund, and REACT-EU. Therefore, what we have to do is very complex and complicated. And the following months, we should be actively involved in these negotiations. You should know that for the time being, the Council has not confirmed the whole text, the whole document. It hasn't expressed its consent to this document, so we should wait for the Council's consent. The position of the European Parliament is well known. Now, concerning the question raised to me, the European Parliament and the regions of Europe have started an exercise right now aiming to mobilize and persuade people. This has started long time ago. This process should continue. We have started this activity, and we have some good results so far. The work that has been done in the Regions Committee and the European Parliament by all regions, by all unions of the regions, have given us the possibility to have a better view. This is the point where we are right now concerning the European Council. There are some demands that have been raised and have to do with the recovery fund. So we fully agree with what Madam Commissioner said when she gave a talk to the European Parliament. She mentioned that the greatest amount of these funds will be given to green projects because our policies should be cohesive. There must be cohesion among all our policies. This fund is part of the projects and is part of the broader policy concerning the green issues. Concerning Greece now, Greece, of course, has paid a high price concerning the policies that led it to this difficult economic condition. And of course, due to the coronavirus, Greece has suffered a lot, and mainly the Greek tourism has suffered a lot. Now the recovery moment has come. It's not a choice, it's an imperative need. If we don't want to collapse socially and economically wise, then we should, using this tool, we should invest everywhere in a massive and solid way. Otherwise, we are at risk. And even the rich countries might be carried away to an economic crisis. And of course, that impact would be numerous and huge, because it would have a multiplying effect to the other countries. Therefore, we should all be involved in this approach of cohesion. It's the best approach to achieve the goals and the economic targets that we desire to have. So we should know whether there is an degradation of the situation in some countries that will be perceived in richer countries. So if we want to have the recovery of Europe, cohesion is absolutely necessary. Cohesion should be done at central level. That will allow us to build up Europe just as the structural funds allowed us to do so. I apologize, but we should stop at this moment. You were correct when you said all this. Mr. Omerji cannot hear the lady, but we have to stop here because the second panel should begin. So now we can move on with our second panel. Once again, we have the opportunity to have very important guests, because we will receive the examples presented to us by the Prime Minister of the state of North Rhine and Westphalia, Mr. Armin Laschet, who governs the greatest region of Europe, and how he tackled the crisis. We also have with us Mr. Renaud Muselier, who is the president of the Association of French Regions, the president of region Provence-Alpes. We will also have Mr. Papasteriou, who is the president of the Central Union of Municipalities of Greece, and Mr. Theodorikakos, who is the Minister of Interior. I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Tzitzikostas. I'm very happy that we are welcoming to this meeting Mr. Laschet, the Prime Minister of the state of North Rhine and Westphalia. He is a really good friend who has left his footprint in European policy. He is a leader in Germany, a politician, that is much needed not only by his country but by the whole of Europe. I have the honor to have worked with him. I know how important his work is. He is the leader and he is leading one of the biggest regions in the European Union, and how he intervenes in surgical precision to tackle any problem that might come up. For example, the coronavirus crisis. This is an example of the leadership that Europe and Germany need to have. I'm particularly happy to have him with us today because I would like to welcome him to a forum that is happening because we had the cancellation of the Thessaloniki International Fair that happens every year. This year, Germany would be the honored country. But unfortunately, due to the pandemic, this year's TIFF was cancelled. The commercial part of it was cancelled, but we kept the political part. In my view, I believe that when TIFF is held in 2021, Germany should be once again the honored country, because this was a golden opportunity both for Greece and Germany to have Germany as honored country in this year's TIFF. Before giving the floor to the Prime Minister, I would like to say that 2 days after the presentation of the President of the European Commission, Madam von der Leyen, about the State of the Union, which was a very ambitious presentation that raised some spearhead issues for Europe and for the German presidency. For example, the environment, the Green Agreement, transition to digital issue, migration, health, and we should underline that the proposal by the European Committee of the Regions to have more funds was adopted by the European Commission. The President of the Commission, Madam von der Leyen, showed where Europe should return to in the following years and should be directed. In my view, what is important nowadays to tackle and see is how Europe will be able to reach at that point in an effective and substantial way. So from where we should answer the question how. The answer to this vital question it was shown in practice during the recent crisis. According to that, undoubtedly, we cannot talk about the future of Europe if member states go back to seclude themselves in their borders. We must have cooperation and collective effort in order to have the Europe that we want to have. So I would like to repeat once again something that I've mentioned in the past. For me, the Europe of two dimensions, that is, a Europe that is focused on Brussels and the national capitals of its member states, has shown its limits and borders. In my view, Europe must change in a substantial way. That is to move to the Europe of three dimensions. European Union, member states, and regions with municipalities. So these three parts will be working together in order to improve the daily life and quality of life of its citizens. And I've mentioned that in Greece, and it's true for Europe as well. It's time to move on from a regional transition, from regional self-administration to regional governance. Some countries like Germany have already achieved that. That's the only way that we can recover from the pandemic and its impact. If policies are designed planned and implemented from bottom upwards, based on the needs and priorities of each region. Germany has proven all these years that it has a very effective decentralization model. The regions can be the institutional advocates of the future Europe. With these words, I would like to welcome once again the Prime Minister, Mr. Armin Laschet. I really look forward to his views concerning the future of Europe in relation to municipalities and regions. Thank you very much. Mr. Laschet, based on what Mr. Tzitsikostas said, I would like to ask you the following. What can we learn from your state concerning the cooperation between the region and the central administration? What are the lessons that you took during the COVID pandemic and you could share with us? Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this important forum. Right now, I am in Berlin because here today we had the meeting of the Council with the representatives of the 16 states. We have changed the constitution so that we will be able to financially support local self-administration. So I'm not talking to you from North Rhine-Westphalia, but from Berlin. I'd like to tell you that what we are experiencing today and what we are talking about right now shows that we haven't overcome the COVID pandemic. We still need answers. A few weeks ago, I visited the Greek Prime Minister, Mr. Mitsotakis, and I went to the island of Lesbos. I must tell you that the Greeks feel the pandemic crisis even worse than we do here in Germany because of the other problems that Greece is facing right now. What I mean by that is the Turkish attitude towards Greece, and Greece is safeguarding the external European borders. That's why Greece should be supported to that. And it is also the refugee crisis. The European assistance is necessary to this refugee crisis. During the pandemic, we talked a lot about how we could tackle this global challenge and fight against it and combat it. And as you know, in the 16 federal states in Germany, we have a lot of knowledge and experience. Plus the municipalities that are powering themselves. Cooperation at this level has shown how effective it is. The way we handled this pandemic in the 16 states is very different. We have areas in the former Eastern Germany where we have a very low number of cases, but we have cases, but we have other areas near the River Rhine where we had high number of cases. Therefore, we have seen that we must focus on how we can take drastic measures, especially in urban centers. But in areas where there is not so much spread of the virus, to close down everything. In March, we had a lockdown in Germany. We closed the schools and kindergartens, and we had serious financial consequences when the productive units, the factories, and the shops closed. Now that coronavirus cases are increasing, we don't want to have a general lockdown, but to have to impose local measures. Local lockdown measures, and I believe that we are achieving that. Besides the financial consequences, I believe that we must revise health policy. We had a policy and a law about short-term employment posts, and I'm happy to see that the French Prime Minister, Mr. Macron, and Madame Merkel will issue and buy European bonds in order to have additional support. That was an important, unprecedented step because it's clear that no one is responsible for this pandemic. The pandemic has attacked and has caused more problems to the southern European states, that is Italy and Spain. And they suffered, Italy and Spain suffered greatly from the pandemic, and the other countries took their lessons from that. And when we saw the images from Bergamo hospitals, this was a lesson for us, and we had the time to react properly. The Italians didn't have the time to react in that way, but now it's high time to react so, because it was first attacked by the virus. The 750 billion will be given to the member states in order to have economic sustainability, prosperity, and sustaining employment posts. It would be good to link to that the economic questions, plus the economic the challenge of digitalization, if we want to be competitive to China and European and the United States. As European citizens, as Mr. Di Costa said, we have three dimensions. We have the European dimension, which should be strong, and we need more Europe at this level. We need a European research at the medical and pharmaceutical level, and simple things, for example, like the protective masks that couldn't be found in the European market because we depended on the Chinese market, and we gave all our production to China in order to gain some extra cents. This means that we should become independent, and we should take the production of health items in our hands. We must have a common health research concerning the vaccine. Besides the money and who is in charge of the survey and research, it should be given to all European citizens. That's the European dimension. Secondly, we have the member states. The member states are called upon to tackle the crisis in their countries. And the third level is the dimension of the regions and municipalities. This is the level that is nearer, closer to citizens, and knows better the issues that should be solved and settled. This is true not only for the pandemic, but in other sectors as well. When we talk about digitalization, we also need a digital internal market. We need a common strategy, both for the taxation of digital overvalue, hyper value, because we have a great a lot of SMEs, but during the pandemic, several citizens ordered electronically the products they needed from America because they don't have the taxation to pay, although there were electronic shops in Europe, but they had to pay the taxation. So we must proceed to this about this taxation. I know that today in Greece you have to move away from lignite. We had a similar problem in the past, and we also stopped using lignite. There are a lot of things that we could talk about that. We among regions, because the issues that demand the energy solutions are of strategic importance. And one last thing that I would like to mention is the following. The border between the Netherlands and North Rhine and Westphalia was open throughout and during the pandemic. Other German states closed their borders to Austria and France, which had detrimental effect both to the citizens and the economy. We believed that we should tackle the pandemic in a cross-border manner. We had a cross-border team that meant that we exchanged our data and information about the pandemic with our Dutch colleagues, and we tackled this challenge without stopping the borders, because the virus doesn't stop at the borders. It goes beyond them. We cannot tackle virus only within our country. The lessons that we take from the pandemic is that at border points there must be a cross-border cooperation, so that our external borders will never be closed again and separate our citizens and damage our economy as a result. I'd like also to stress and point out the work being done by Mr. Tzitzikostas, who is the president of the European Committee of the Regions. He showed us that he is a young politician, but he has long experience. He can tackle all issues. We need more politicians of this kind that have responsibility, energy, promptness, and effectiveness, and can support the European project and task. If we have in mind Madame von der Leyen's presentation about the European Union, we will see that we have big European goals, and we shouldn't leave Europe in the hands of popularists. To this direction, we will all struggle for. We here in Northern Rhine and Westphalia. I would like to thank Mr. Armin Laschet for his presence here in Helexpo Forum. I know that he has a very heavy schedule. I know the struggle that he has been given. I truly appreciate that you found this time to share with us your very interesting views. I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to wish you every success, because a personality like yours is the personality that Germany needs in the following day, a personality that Europe needs in the following day. Thank you very much for being with us. Now we can move on to our next speaker. He is Mr. Dimitris Papastergiou. He is mayor of Trikala and president of the Central Union of Greek Municipalities. Good morning, Mr. Papastergiou. We heard what Mr. Lasset said, the lessons that we learned and we took from the pandemic. What were your lessons? Do you believe that regions should have more responsibilities and competencies? Is that one of your conclusions? Good morning from Trikala. Good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me. I believe that this year was a bad year, but a very educative year, because we believe that many things are given, but that's not the way are. It's a golden opportunity to review a lot of things. It's similar to the hurricane that is hitting our country these days. We should try to restructure our infrastructure and to see how we should keep our society united, cohesive, and provide equal opportunities to everyone. Concerning the first and the second degree of self-administration, regional self-administration, I believe that it's a golden opportunity for us to use every penny from the various programs that will be given to Greece. That is the NSRF program, the Antonis Trichis program, and the Recovery Fund, of course, that the Minister mentioned earlier. So we should try to see all these programs together. We shouldn't tackle them individually so that we won't have overlapping. The second point is the holistic approach. We shouldn't only see one intervention on its own. For example, the construction of a pavement. We should see how this intervention will be bioclimatic, how it will be able to attract more tourism. The third point should be how we are able to preserve social cohesion. I insist on that. Since March, the municipalities and regions and the Ministry of Interior, we have experienced an unprecedented situation and opportunity, because it is our duty to react and keep our society united. There were tens of thousands of families that were supported and helped by the municipalities and regions door to door. But we should also try to see how we can reduce the unemployment rate and what are the skills that our citizens should have. We should try to see what is the direction of the market economy in order to train our unemployed people, because not the whole country is the same, not the whole Europe is the same. We have regions that have more agricultural production, there are other tourism, other regions focusing on tourism. So social cohesion that will focus on employment skills and the creation of infrastructure for the creation of manufacturing units, because Greece is having a new infrastructure. It has new ports, new road accesses, and new energy map. So we would like to participate in the discussions and negotiations about the recovery fund. We want to be closer to the ministry and the government in order to implement what is necessary for our communities. during the pandemic, we realized how important it is to have the appropriate and necessary infrastructure. If we didn't have the broadband network, the whole thing would have collapsed. So we need this fast broadband wireless or wired infrastructure. That's very important that we have all realized, and this should be done through recovery fund. Another point is energy, a huge issue that has to do with people. We should move to electrification and the production of clean energy. We must have in mind the energy balance that should be achieved in our daily actions. The previous speaker talked about lignite and how much we would be interested in at looking in our lives in a different way. Another point is the waste. Greece is lagging behind. The government planning is very ambitious to that. It has started talking about the thermal waste processing. And to stop using landfills. Smart cities is another issue, and I'm not talking about cities that want to show off, but cities which could be safe using their infrastructure. I mentioned the Janus hurricane that is hitting our country these days. We could have the necessary sensors that would inform people, the citizens, about the forthcoming risk. That is to be able to notify people about some risks coming so that citizens will be able to protect themselves. And besides all this, I would like to say that the pandemic that we are experiencing is much bigger than the human mind could think of. We cannot perceive all this. People have started going away from self-government. They have become gullible. We must convince people that we do our best, and in order to convince them, what is needed is more transparency, more democracy, so that we will bring our fellow citizens closer to us and all together to move on a step forward. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for your presentation. I think now it's high time to talk with Mr. Livanis, who is the Deputy Minister of Interior, who might be able to answer the questions raised by Mr. Papastergiou. Mr. Papastergiou talked about infrastructure, energy, smart cities, and waste management. I'd like to welcome you to our discussion and thank you for being with us. But my question is the following. What are the priorities of the government? In the new Bill of Law, will you give more competencies to regions? I'm very happy to be with you, even in this virtual manner. I'd like to make two remarks. The first one is the following. The last 10 months was an unprecedented condition that showed a lot of things about the resilience of the political system and every aspect of public life. The successful management of the first phase of the coronavirus has raised the bar high, and we are determined to succeed in the second COVID wave. And there is no question raised that is economy versus health. the answer is self-evident. The health of the citizens goes first, because if we don't have that, we cannot have economic growth. We work with Mr. Tzitsikostas and Mr. Papasteriou, and we want to change the model of the country. There is a limitation, that is Greece, contrary to Germany, is not a federal state, but this doesn't limit us to have a very generous redistribution of competencies from central government to regional and local self-administration. But in order to do that, we must be very clear and see who does what and why. And we do this for several issues. The citizens and business people should know where to go. The first rule will be proximity. Whatever is of regional interest will be in charge of regions. Whatever is in charge, whatever has to do with municipalities will go to municipalities, and whatever is central will go to the central government. So the whole model that the government perceives the state will change. The first steps have been made. The pandemic gave us some answers to the potential that exists. For the last 10 years, the regional operation programs were managed by the regional governments. We all agree, and Mr. Tzitsikostas as well, that we still haven't reached the degree that we wanted to have in order to reach the absorption rate we would like to have. But we can still try to find real solutions to it. One of these is bureaucracy itself. We should break this red tape. We should accelerate processes. It might seem oxymoron at first, but this is to the benefit of transparency, because corruption is found in the complexity of procedures. This means that we should move on directly to the acceleration of simplifying bureaucracy. In recent months, we had some digital changes that paved the way. Something simple. In order to have an official declaration, we had to go to the citizen service centers. But now this can be done electronically, and this means that 1.5 million people don't have to go to these citizen service centers. Therefore, we move on to a new model of self-governance, regional self-governance, and this will allow the maturation of the central government and regional governments. The central government should realize what is its role. When we talk about local self-government, we mean an organization that will have the necessary tools to exercise municipal policies or regional policies. I'd like to reassure you that no one in Athens could be fully aware of the problems that Central Macedonia has. And can't know all these problems as well as the region of Central Macedonia itself knows. We must move on directly to see the policies, the sectors and the policies that must be transferred to local self-governments. Some efforts were made in the past, but they were stopped, they were postponed for a year or two, and then they never continued. That's the case of the health sector. Mr. Tzitsikostas can confirm that. Mr. Patoulis, the governor of Attica, would like to make an intervention. And then you will continue and resume. Good morning, Mr. Patoulis. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to say that I'm very happy to be with you today to this very important event. It's very clear that this is an unprecedented experience for the whole planet. But we must manage this and get out of it wiser. The crisis is a challenge of our own generation, and win this war. We must tackle all the risks and contribute to the fastest possible economic recovery. For Europe, this crisis is a unique opportunity, no matter how oxymoron this might sound. It's an opportunity to show its solidarity and its cohesion. Our continent moved on when it united its forces, when member states had a common pace, and through this crisis we will be able to recover the confidence of the European citizens, because the truth is that in recent years the European vision faded out. We had a populist advent with Euroscepticism. The thought that Europe is going away from average citizen, and that the decisions are made by some institutions with no direct contact to citizens has supported this view. This is a conviction that was supported. We should show that Europe is our support at hard times. It's our stable reference point for all its people. And for our country as well. The decisions made in recent months are important. The recovery fund and the cash flow injections is the practical answer that Europe gave against the pandemic crisis. Now we're moving on to the second phase, which is the most difficult one, the accelerated implementation of these policies, because the plan is there. The policies that have been announced by the government are included in this operational program, are to the right direction. What is hard is the implementation. The regions should have a central role to play in this venture, because besides everything else, the regions are those institutional agencies which, together with the municipalities, have the daily contact with the citizens. The truth is that in recent years, a lot of steps have been made in order to reinforce the role of regions. That's a very positive evolution, even more today, because the role of regions can be decisive in at least two sectors. The first sector is supporting the most vulnerable groups of the society, safeguarding in this way social cohesion. The social consequences of the crisis haven't been fully apparent. The following months will be difficult. The most means of social policy are being implemented through regions and municipalities. We support the poor and homeless people and people in need. Therefore, we should continue this cooperation and make it even more constructive, because social solidarity and cohesion is a fundamental precondition for economic recovery. how can we recover? How can we accelerate that by having serious studies in order to speed up the recovery plan, the recovery fund? We should promote targeted actions in fields of high added value, for example, green development and circular economy. We should include big energy projects in the recovery fund. Mr. Patoulis, I must stop you because we are connected to the president of the Association of French Regions. Please, we should stop at this point and listen to Mr. Renaud Muselier. I have the pleasure and honor to welcome Mr. Renaud Muselier, the president of the Association of French Regions. It's very important to have him with us, to share his view with us about the way they tackle the crisis and what are the basic measures that the base measures they took, and what would you like to see in the months to come? Good morning, Mr. Muselier. We're very happy to have you with us. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's very important that we are able to exchange these views because we are Europeans and have a common culture. Given the fact that I come from southern France, I would like to say to my Greek friends with whom I am together here, and to invite Mr. Tzitsikostas to our next meeting in Paris. The situation that we are experiencing is very complicated. We, the whole world, Europe, are facing a hygiene crisis that has several consequences. Economic, social, and not only. It's a health crisis that hit us in the first trimester of 2020. We try to tackle the crisis in a very united way because we are in contact with each other. In all of regions in France, we work together. Strasbourg was a region that suffered much more, and physicians, medical doctors tried to tackle the difficulties that we had concerning the ICU units, the masks, the tests, and we managed to better prepare ourselves. In France, we had the green, regions, the orange regions, and the red regions that suffered even more. We focused on the red regions in order to help them to tackle with the situation. Something else that was very important is that during the health crisis, we never accused the central government in the effort they made. There was a common view, in other words. We respected what the decisions of the central government. Of course, we are not blind. We followed up what was happening, but we reacted a lot in issues that have to do with the masks and the tests. And during this period, we showed a flexibility and an ability We have proven that we're able to react. We did things that we haven't done before. And in this way, I think we tackled it very well because we gave subsidies and grants to all regions of the country and even to very small traders. We try to financially support them in order to prevent social consequences. All this is behind us, of course. Time was needed, but we managed to do a lot. There is a strategy, of course. There was Brexit, there was a refugee crisis, there are several open fronts in the European Union. However, the Europe managed to show that if it is united, it can settle all these problems. And it has the possibility to reach agreements with all the governments and the prime ministers of each country. Agreements that have to do with the various sectors that will be reinforced by the subsidies and grants and funds that will be given to tourism, energy, and not only. We wanted to convince everybody that we can do that united. The population of the countries are suffering, so we must explain to them that when they start listening about all these millions of euros, they are afraid that this money might never reach their level. So they should be certain that this is not just hot air when we talk to them about the money that will be given, because very frequently they cannot fully understand the economic strategy about the survival of our economy, because they try to give a battle for their economy, for their future, and they feel remote from all this. This is what I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'd like to tell you that I love Greece. I am constantly informed about what is happening in the Mediterranean, and we will always help Greece against their rather annoying neighbors. I'd like to thank the whole of France for helping us and supporting us at periods that are very difficult for our country. Thank you very much for your intervention. We'll talk again shortly, and I hope I'll have the opportunity to see you in person. Now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Livanis. Could you please conclude in just 2 minutes and perhaps mention what Mr. Musele mentioned? what Mr. Missoula said is very interesting indeed. It's very important to exchange points of views. It's important because the French model of organization is much closer to Greek reality. Because it's not a federal state as in Germany. I talked to you how we're going to have the redistribution of competencies, but in order to do that, we must have an organized operational plan. We must try to see how we will have this transfer of competencies from the central state to local self-government, so that we won't have any disturbance, to have the transfer of personnel and funds, and to find a way to assess this whole venture. So this is a cycle of quality that has correctional actions in order to see how we can change the image to the state. We want to move on directly with the regions in order to assess this change. Thank you very much. I'd like to underline that we have a very close and productive cooperation with the Ministry of Interior and Mr. Theodorikakos and Mr. Livanis, the Deputy Minister, on these issues, because we're having really good discussions, and soon we will reach a good level concerning decentralization. Finally, I would like to welcome the governor from Crete, Mr. Arautakis. You would like to make an intervention. I know that your task is very difficult. Could you just have an intervention in just 2 minutes, because we are out of time? Thank you very much for inviting me. I would like to congratulate our president for having this teleconferencing together with the European Commissioner. For the last 5 years, we have worked and claimed social cohesion. Today, due to the crisis, the structural funds and the recovery funds should be designed in such a way so that the weakness of the past will be solved. The previous speakers talked about the problems that are similar to each of us. What I'd like to point out is that we can't have something happening in the region without the region itself. We must have more trust and confidence. We're having good cooperation with the ministries, but it should become better. We have submitted our proposals about regional governance. Europe has proven that it wants to move forward with the amount of money it gave. We must take these funds and do the projects that haven't occurred the previous years. Trust, trust, trust. That's all. Trust to the regions. That's all needed. At this point, we have completed this 2-hour discussion. I hope you found it interesting. because you listened to the leading personalities in this field from Greece, France, and Germany. We had the European Commissioner. I believe that this was a very detailed analysis of where we are heading. I can conclude by saying that your work is very difficult. You have tight deadlines ahead of you, so that this crisis will become an opportunity for Greece. In this event, we saw the three levels of governance. We listened to the European Union, we listened to the ministers representing the national level, and we listened to people from Greece and Europe who are regional governors and give important battles and prove that the regions and municipalities, if they work together, both in Greece and worldwide, can claim and achieve even more active role for the way that European regions play. And we'll try to find a way to see how Europe can be closer to citizens. I'd like to thank all our friends who attended this event, both physically and virtually, and I'd like to thank you personally for accepting our invitation to come here and moderate this panel. Thank you very much, and may you have every success in your following steps.